neighbors.
Basically, but for jurisdictional boundaries in the same community. But I wanted to have a chance just to talk to y'all in person about our neighborhood sign project, which has been going on now for a number of years. Give you a little bit of background. If you travel Beach Drive all the time, like I do, so you've seen the kind of the grand sign that we have at the at Beach and Leland on what we call the Leland Triangle. This project is an initiative that I started about 5 years ago. We did a major public engagement with the community to develop our sign, and the purpose was to really just kind of promote a little bit of neighborhood identity and build some neighborhood pride into that. Inspired a little bit by the incorporation movement. There's just kind of ancient history now in Rollingwood, but some of you may remember that. County Council turned that down. So we a part of the association, which has been around since 1982, but we really wanted to sort of re-enliven it to do as much as we can through the association. So the big sign was kind of phase one of our signage project, and we have another series of signs that we're interested in putting up in a few select locations around the neighborhood. This is the actual sign. It's a miniature of the big one that you've seen on Beach Drive. And I'd like to just kind of give you, maybe if I could, a little bit of lay of the land, because we have a concept where we would like to put up some of these on the border locations between the village and our neighborhood. And so let me just pass this around quickly, if I may. This is for you. Okay, because I have a couple minutes, is that all right? Speak? I've got enough for everybody. So just to acclimate you, the red dots here are the areas where the border crosses. It's unique because just the way the municipal boundaries were drawn, you actually have boundaries that occur right in the middle of the street. So there's not a particular geographic feature that defines them. So we have 4 locations here, and I'd like to kind of focus actually on 2 of the streets. I will begin actually with. So let me tell you the streets that we have here. We have Cummings Lane, we have Shepherd, we have Thornapple, and we have Summit Avenue. On Summit and on Shepherd, there are existing Pepco-owned utility poles that are, if they're not sitting on the border, they're in the village, inches away from the border. And so what we are proposing. Sure.
The park at the end of Turner Lane is actually in Rollingwood, is that right?
That's the way that line was drawn. It's county-owned land. That is just kind of how
I just thought I'd ask.
How the line was drawn. We don't own it. The county owns it.
The park is not. The park is a county park.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
it just looks like it's in Rollingwood. I just wanted to clear that up.
So a little bit of the. This was inspired, frankly, by some of the existing signage that the village has on some of these areas. So on Summit Street, we have a pole there. I'll show you a picture of it here. This is a picture of the utility pole looking into the village.
Well, you have, I think, I said, okay.
Yeah.
Into Martin's Additions.
Into Martin's Additions, upon which the village has affixed their sign, your sign, onto a Pepco-owned pole. And that's, as I said, if it's not on the border, it's inches away. This house here where it says 7406, that's actually a Rollingwood house.
Hello, young man.
And if you flip the page here, this is the same pole with just looking from the other side. So what we are suggesting is to attach this sign that I just showed you directly opposite the village's sign that is depicted in the other picture. Part of the intent of this actually is to avoid having to install additional poles and facilities that, so as to kind of reduce visual clutter for everybody on the street.
But can I ask a question of our council at this point? Affixing a sign to a Pepco utility pole, do we have any control over that?
We have control of signage in our right-of-way, so
Okay.
there would be 2 consents required, one from the village and one from Pepco.
Okay. So we actually have consent from Pepco to put up signs on the utility poles, or implied consent?
Well, yeah, I don't know historically.
Right.
Hold up that sign again so that he can see it.
Yeah,
I
okay.
assume it would be Martin's Edition, is that correct?
Hey, Wayne, how you doing?
Pardon me?
Rolling Wood or Martin's Edition, or what?
The sign would be opposite the village's sign
Okay.
on that pole. The pole itself may be, as I said, inches inside the village's boundaries, but it is a Pepco-owned pole. Let me just show you the other pole-based location. This is on Shepherd Street. This is directly across from the park. And here, there is no village sign on the utility pole itself. There is one directly opposite the street. What we have here is a no parking sign, and I gather that the village installed that doggy bag dispenser, maybe with Petco permission, I don't know. But again, what we would propose to avoid having more visual clutter would be to affixing this sign somewhere above the no parking sign there. So those are the 2 pole-based locations. I would note on Thornapple Street, there's our utility pole that's clearly inside the rolling wood borders that we would propose putting it there. It would just involve some coordination with the neighbor there, that house. So I don't have to address that here today. And then the final location.
I think if that's a pole that is on the village right-of-way, you have to coordinate with the village, not the homeowner that has nothing to say about that, if it's in the right-of-way, in the public right-of-way.
Again, it's a Pepco-owned pole, so...
I think
Oh, it's a pole.
You were
It's a
referring to a
Pepco.
third location outside the village, is that right?
The third location outside the village is, yes, that's right. That
Oh.
was the one in Rolling Wood. Yeah, that's
Okay.
on Thornapple Street. It's just down.
Yeah, that's what I remember the last time we considered this, one was outside the village boundaries. Is that what you're saying? So we would have nothing to do with that?
Precisely.
Okay.
Right.
And then the other site, which I'm willing to, I don't need to dwell on this but I would want to just maybe bring it up a little bit. On Cummings Lane, this is not the sign. This is not the exit location where we would suggest affixing our sign. But if you visualize, this is a speed, and I can pass these along. Let's share that. So what you're looking at there is that's a speed limit sign, and above that is a village sign marking the boundary. Immediately opposite that is another sign. Maybe the county put it up there. It calls attention to a stop sign that's up ahead, basically saying there's a stop sign up ahead. What we had proposed was to attach this sign immediately below that. Actually, I do have a picture. You can pass this along here. No, I don't need those, but. So this is actually, I kind of put up there temporarily, so you can see that there. So Matt was telling me that there were some reservations
Later, I think he's under the weather.
around that.
Which is something I can't afford to be.
Okay.
Matt had mentioned to me that there were some concerns about attaching to that sign because of the potential for driver confusion. As I said, I don't need to dwell on that here. We were frankly inspired to suggest this because immediately across the street from that is the exact same thing where you have a traffic control sign that has a village sign attached to it. But I could recognize that if the town is willing to accept maybe potential liability over their stuff, you wouldn't necessarily want to assume that for a sign that Roland would put up there.
Thank you. Let me ask for a little discussion on this.
What
now.
about the fourth location?
Outside the village.
That was outside the
Okay.
village. Yeah. Any observations anyone wants to make on this?
Frank,
This
you
came
don't
up
know
again
what
last time, but we can repeat whatever anyone said.
I don't have a lot of concerns as long as there's not a lot of signage clutter. I think that's concerning.
And that would be the sign of the size of the sign?
it, Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the exact sign.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they're very spiffy.
Yes, they are.
We worked very hard on this.
Really nice.
Years
You
of
should be
a lot
proud
of
of them.
opinions went into this. I'm sure you have that here as well.
Ron, any legal considerations? You said it would require village approval.
Signs in the right-of-way should generally conform to the Maryland Manual on Road Signage. A traffic engineer would be able to tell us whether this conforms. You can allow private signs if you like, but think about if you allow one sign, be prepared perhaps for a request from another private party. But other than that, the council can decide what it wants to do.
Okay. Any observations from residents, one way or the other? Any things we haven't thought about?
Classy sign.
Very nice.
Okay. Well, we are having our traffic engineer going through all of our signs right now to try to repair or replace all old damaged ones, to bring them all into kind of a standard form, to make sure they're all consistent with the codes and so on. So this is kind of an opportune time to raise this. We can throw it in with all our other signage issues that will be arising. Any other considerations?
But presuming
Yeah.
that if there's no issues with this particular request,
Yeah.
are we fine with proceeding, or do we need to vote on this?
I would say pending Joe Kutro's analysis.
Yeah.
Then we could do a quick vote.
Right.
Next time.
Good. Okay.
Well, I appreciate
Anything
that. Maybe just to kind of close this out,
Yeah.
I would simply state that I think that this sign is, very, very consistent with the existing signage that the village has there. And maybe with respect to precedent, we are the, immediately adjacent neighbor.
Right.
So one could develop, if you needed to have a policy per se, not necessarily setting a precedent if the request is coming
Okay.
from a neighborhood signage. So you're
Okay. Thank you.
Actually, one additional thought. So when these signs need to be replaced, if Rollingwood were to redesign your signs and they would change the shape or appearance somehow, would we need to reapprove that? Is there a process for that?
Yes.
Okay.
And we could write up a memorandum of understanding to address those types of issues.
Good. Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you. So we'll wait to hear from
be considering
the council.
Good, thank you. Would you like to be considered to be annexed by Martin's Additions?
If you have us.
We have...
We're 832 homes.
it'd be double our
Yeah,
size.
right. So, thank you very, very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on. We can vote on the minutes. I think we have discussed them via email.
Are there any other residents?
I asked earlier, there were none. Oh, and some people came in the meantime. Any other residents' comments?
You spoke loudly enough, I think it.
Okay. Okay. Approval of the minutes. We have approved by email. So want to raise a motion to approve them formally?
That we approve the minutes.
Unless you want to.
Okay. I'll second.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Passes. Office update proposal, we are postponing as the village staff goes through some of the ideas. We come to the amendment to policy for articles to be included in Martin's edition, the newsletter, and the consideration is, where was that?
Tab 4.
4. Right now, the text is limited to 100 words, which is pretty small. It's less than a tweet. And, no, tweet is 140 characters,
Characters,
characters, not
things.
140 words, right, sorry. It's more than a tweet, less than a telegraph.
I'd say
It has been suggested that 100 words is too small. I tend to agree with that. In fact, I wonder, let me throw out an idea. Do we need a word limit at all? Since the village manager is the editor of the Martin's edition and has authority over what gets into it, can we simply rely on the editor's editing to constrain what goes in? Or should we have a specific limit? Discussion?
It would actually make it a little bit easier for the editor if there is a word limit on things, so that it doesn't have to be excised.
And this is exactly 100 words. And I think this.
What's 100 words?
This.
That, okay. Those
It's not that short.
Okay.
I think that this is sufficient to express your thoughts if you're announcing something.
With the example that was brought, there's something of like the library, if there are several events going on in the coming week, that it would go over that.
But one could say that
Yeah.
if there's several events and there's, say, a bio of someone who's presenting, one could, summarize it.
Right, or link to something else.
Yeah.
Right.
And point them to the web,
And,
their
and not
website.
write something so lengthy that, I frankly doubt anyone
Thank
would
you.
write something very long.
That overshadows the rest of the content too.
Okay, so there is an agreement, it seems, to keep the limit of 100 words.
Seems reasonable.
Okay, good. So let it be. We don't need a motion, we don't need to say anything, it just proceeds. Okay, next item. Boy, we're really going through this. Draft ordinance. There are 2 items in the new ordinance. We've already had one reading of this, is that correct, Ryan?
Correct.
Yeah.
We're having our public hearing now.
Okay, and it is an ordinance, where is that? There are 2 things it will do. One is to allow the code enforcement officer, who is designated as the village manager, to accept shrubbery and other things in the right-of-way. And let me just read if in the discretion, here, the code enforcement officer may waive requirement for a license for alteration or replacement of stairs, guardrails, walkways, if in the, this is on a home, I'm sorry, there's 2 items here. If in the discretion of the code enforcement officer, the cost and inconvenience of the license exceeds the benefit to the village. This is, don't sweat the small stuff, essentially. Is that legal? I mean, is that a
Yes, that's
good
right.
rendition of the legal status here?
The code currently requires a homeowner to execute a license to use the right-of-way, to put a private improvement in the right-of-way,
Right.
including vegetation. This would allow the code enforcement officer to waive that requirement for a written license
Right.
if the enforcement officer determines that, like you said, it's too little to worry
Right.
about with the burden and expense of going through the license, because the village does have to pay me to prepare the license
have a
and
question.
record it in land records.
Can you expand a little bit on the license requirements?
Yeah, do you want to? Yeah.
Sure. So the code currently provides that a homeowner needs approval from the village to place something in the right-of-way, like a retaining wall, a fence, a planter box. And the current procedure for giving that permission is to have a written document executed, a right-of-way agreement, that is recorded in land records that says, the homeowner understands, even though this is put in the public right-of-way, it remains a private improvement. The homeowner is responsible to maintain it and to remove it if public use necessitates removal, for example, or if a utility company needs to bury a line, what have you, the homeowner agrees to remove it at his or her cost.
Okay, is this an arbitrary decision by the village manager whether to grant this license, or is it...
Could you identify name and street?
Pardon me?
Identify yourself, name and
I'm
street.
John Shiro. I live on Chestnut Street.
Okay, thank you. No.
The village never acts arbitrarily.
Oh, okay.
Right now, it is required. Without without permission for the village manager to give to waive it. So right now, there's no ability to waive, according to the code. But this is giving, as the manager, a ability to waive if it looks like it's too onerous, given what is happening.
For example, if someone has a walkway in the right-of-way and they just want to repair it or replace it, the code enforcement officer could say, since you're just replacing something that's already there, we're not going to go through the license process. Just go ahead and get it done. Here's your permit.
Does that include driveway aprons?
Driveway aprons, yes, are another animal. You actually do not need a license to use the right-of-way for a driveway apron. You just need a permit.
For a sidewalk?
Correct.
Okay.
A connection to the public sidewalk from the apron.
Okay,
you mean.
all right, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, identify.
Valley, Oxford Street. What about establishing something new that's not there before? Where's the line and what falls on which side and what falls on the other side?
It will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. The code enforcement officer will, take a look at such things as, what is it exactly you're putting in? Is this something that's commonly put in the right-of-way that your neighbors already have? And, weighing those types of factors.
Okay. There is the second change to the code provides the same sort of waiver ability for the placement of non-woody plant growth shrubs if in the discretion of the code enforcement officer the cost and inconvenience of the license exceeds the benefit to the village. So this is not a structure, it's plants, it's shrubs, non-woody structures, or non-woody plants. So it's the same sort of thing. If you're going to put in some hedges, the manager can say you don't need a license for that. That's two items, and they follow from each other. They're very similar.
I'm just asking.
Name and street.
Sally Marin Turner. If someone does want to put a plant there, they do still have to ask the village manager for permission to do that. Is that right?
That in the village right-of-way.
Correct.
In the village right-of-way.
If it is over 12 inches or will grow to taller than 12 inches. That's currently in the code.
Yeah.
Anything over 12 inches currently requires permission from the village. But this amendment would say if the plant is non-woody, you can have the requirement for a license.
If you're putting rose bushes that are going to grow to 5 feet, you don't need, you can ask for a waiver.
Right.
And also, I think part of what maybe precipitated this was if somebody had a planting that had died and then they wait a season or something and then wait till the fall and plant the same sort of thing as opposed to requiring a whole new license, the understanding is you're just planting what was already there. So
these two things are intended to reduce the impact of the village on residents' behavior. They're making it easier to do things that were more difficult in the past.
And that would require some costs associated with
Require costs, would require licenses, would require review, and so on.
So if you were planting a bush, it could increase the cost of planting that bush threefold, potentially.
Yeah.
Is there any thought about the impact of doing plants in the right-of-way with regard to getting by on the street? The reason I'm saying this is that when we first moved here, I had small children in a stroller, and I found it very difficult on some streets that didn't have a sidewalk. I had to go down the middle of the street and it was difficult to get over when cars were coming. And that's something
that's one of the reasons for the code having limitations on shrubbery being less than 12 inches. So it does so for exactly those reasons, and not to be obstruction.
There were some streets I just couldn't go on because I had no place to go.
That's the intent.
And the proposed ordinance would clarify that if plantings do interfere with the right-of-way, with motorist sight
pedestrians,
or with pedestrian use of the sidewalk, the code enforcement officer can ask the abutting homeowner to trim them back.
Yeah. Okay, the third change clarifies, let me just see if I'm getting this right. Right, okay. The third change is to the rebuilding clauses. We had some inconsistencies, well, not inconsistent, differences. There were two different clauses. If a house burnt down or was substantially destroyed, had physical loss of more than 50%, one clause said the footprint could be enlarged, could not be enlarged beyond the dimensions of the previous building. Another clause said it cannot be enlarged beyond the footprint and height. These were two different ways of stating it, and they could be interpreted very differently. For example, if you looked at the footprint and height, and you had a, what do you call this kind of a roof?
Gable.
A gable roof. It said you can turn a house with a gable roof into a cube, filling in the sides. The other one said, the other clause says you cannot change the dimensions, and what we are clarifying, the three-dimensional dimensions of the house. So you cannot change a gable roof into a cube or build out. You have to be within the boundaries of the old house. What we are now doing is making both clauses consistent with each other and saying, and the wording is not enlarged in any manner, including but not limited to enlargement of any three-dimensional boundary of the building that existed on June 16, 2009. So we're grandfathering in the older houses. So the intention of these changes are to make the clauses dealing with rebuilding consistent and defining it in a way that is clear. We've had challenges, questions coming up several times in the past about this, and the intention is to clarify. Have I summarized that correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, just I might simply add, there were two different standards. One standard applied to developing a building after a fire, for example, and the other standard just applied to rebuilding any nonconformity.
Right,
And
okay.
like you said, we're conforming them so that the same standard applies to both.
We didn't want to encourage arson.
We don't encourage. Yes. So these are the ordinances before us. We've already approved it once. It is open now for public discussion. We've had some on the waivers for hedges and other things. Any other comments? Okay, shall we proceed to a vote? Move to...
I move that we adopt the ordinance.
Okay, I move to adopt the ordinance. I will second it.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Okay, the ordinance is hereby adopted.
I have an
Thank you.
execution copy.
Okay,
We could wait until Richard is available.
okay. And the secretary has to sign. Okay. Thank you. Okay, moving on. Treasurer's report, is that what's next?
Yep.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's fine.
Whoa. Driveway replacement.
Oh, driveway portions. Okay.
Find me again.
Here's another issue that has arisen, and we've have history on this. The village, we've had several different policies, and this is where some problems arise. We've had a policy that we thought of repairing driveway aprons in the course of repairs of street repairs if the aprons were damaged. And the village would then repair that as we were making other street repairs. As I recall, I don't think we've ever gone in and just repaired an apron that was damaged if we weren't doing other work in the neighborhood, but I may be wrong about that. Then it appears that in the past, we have done repairs to aprons that have been damaged. And the question then comes up, if the crews are out there doing concrete work now in the gutters and on the sidewalks, and there are some aprons that have been damaged, should the village do it as a matter of course? Is the resident responsible for paying for it? Who's responsible for repairs of driveway aprons? And I think those are the considerations. So sometimes we've done it, sometimes we haven't done it. We've had a history in the past of encourage people to park off-street, and so we're in favor of making aprons in good repair so people would be encouraged to park in their driveways or garages. And so that's where we stand now. We don't have a clear policy on the matter. You want to?
We don't have a written policy.
We don't have a written policy, and we don't have a clear policy.
Right, well, you may have more institutional knowledge than I do. I only date, I guess, 6 years.
No, you date more than that.
But yeah, I can tell you what
Yeah, go
my
ahead.
understanding of the policy is.
Right.
Unless you'd like to, Matt.
I sent you some emails on this that try to, from the past, where this question has, exactly the same question has come up in the past.
No, if you want to.
Go ahead.
So it's my understanding that, like many of the neighboring towns, when a driveway apron is put in initially, the developer or the homeowner puts in the apron initially.
Right.
Thereafter, the village maintains the apron, typically because the apron, driveway apron, is connected to our curb, and we want to be responsible for doing those repairs so that they're done right to our standards. However, if someone builds an apron that is above standard, we do not repair it, because generally when we repair the aprons, we repair them in the course of doing our ordinary street, sidewalk, and curb repairs. And we're not going to have our contractor do something special on one lot.
Like laying brick over it or something of that
Exactly.
sort. Yeah.
Some communities will actually put that practice in their code. It's currently not in our code, which may be the reason we're having this discussion now. Should we put a policy in our code? Are we happy with this existing policy, or should we change it? If one apron is damaged and that street section isn't on the immediate schedule for repair, then what do you do? It depends on who caused the damage. Obviously, we wouldn't repair an apron if a homeowner's contractor did the damage through negligence, unless there was some, understanding about cost sharing.
Anything, Matt, anything to add to that from
The
current?
bonding. Should also add that when someone does work on their house, we get a right-of-way bond
Right.
that mandates if any damage does occur to the right-of-way in the course of the project, we have this bond available that we can use to restore the right-of-way if the permittee fails to do so.
Okay, and the apron does go across the public right-of-way.
Right.
And so that's where that comes
Correct.
in. I think it has been the practice in the past, not just for development, but if there's a new house going in and the contractor digs up the apron as part of the construction or their equipment and does it, they're responsible for putting in a new one. So it's kind of the repair of existing ones that is the issue here. As a matter of course, is the village responsible for maintaining aprons after they're put in? Any thoughts, discussions?
I think it makes sense in light of our interest in having homeowners use their driveways to keep them in good repair as long as they're not above standard. I agree we should.
And so there's a question about if it's just above standard, because it was my understanding that there's concrete, which would be the typical apron, and anything other than that would basically be the homeowner's responsibility, because whether or not it's a better material or a worse, if it's a worse material, then the village is going to be on the hook for repairing it more often,
Right.
which could also cost the village more money. If it's a greater material, then the village is going to end up spending more money to
Could
replace
a resident
the
just
slate.
say, suppose they move into a house and there's beautiful brickwork out there, could they say, forget about that if you're going to be repairing, pull out that, put in brick. I put in concrete to village standards. They could walk away from that, from their previous construction, could they not?
My understanding would be that they would be responsible for putting in the concrete apron initially, and then thereafter we would repair and maintain it.
And just to piggyback on what Matt said, we wouldn't allow a substandard apron to be put in. Generally, municipalities require conformance to the county standards for driveway aprons, and the county has published standards governing how they should be constructed, how wide, the turning radius, the material to be used.
But suppose there is
the opportunity in the permitting process to...
Suppose there is the resident has a above, higher than standard apron that is in disrepair, that's damaged. Can they just say, put in the standard village one, the standard village concrete?
Well, they can ask.
In the course of ordinary repairs that we're doing, have the village to do
policy.
I can tell you get turned down if you ask.
Right, I was going to say,
I'm a happy person.
The prior policy would be no, because then we have to pay the contractor to remove what's there and to initially install. Again, the initial install is at the owner's cost, and we maintain it after it's been installed.
Okay.
But that's a policy that the council could change.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be.
Can I talk about my experience?
Okay. Identify yourself. This is for, we're recording this, and when they're typing up the minutes and so on, we'd like to know
I'm Marin, I'm on Turner Lane.
Who's speaking.
Our driveway was a disaster. We have lived in our house for not quite 50 years. We have done nothing to it. It was a mess. The apron needed to be replaced. I just assumed that when you're coming through here, we would get a new apron. I was told by Matt that we put in a betterment. And it wasn't real. It was explained that a betterment possibly was brick or slate or whatever. But because some previous owner of our house, not us, we lived in a house almost 50 years, some previous owner had added a little, not standard asphalt, but a little asphalt on top of the cement that was there. I'm sure it was probably done for maintenance. It certainly wasn't done for beauty. It would have taken Beers no more effort to remove that than to remove a standard cement apron. But I was told that couldn't be done because we had done, not us, but we had done a betterment. And so we had to pay to have our apron replaced ourselves. And the man next door, who had a perfectly good cement apron, but it was still cement, no little asphalt on top, got his repaired for free. And I'm really not happy.
Okay. Ron, could you, pursuant to any other discussion, could you write up if we were to formalize this, would it be in code or policy, would you suggest?
What are we formalizing?
A policy towards dealing with aprons.
Yeah, it depends on what you want to say.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, I'd say put it in the code. That's where everybody knows where to look for things. Policies may be overlooked more easily. And the code provision could say whatever you want.
Okay. Could you have a provision that have two versions of it that we can discuss more concretely or asphaltly later? One would be that any apron requiring repair or renewal of some kind, the village will deal with, regardless of whether there were betterments or improvements, it was above grade or below grade standard in the past. That's one version. Another version, stricter, that would only cover the cost of a standard replacement or repair.
Okay.
Does that clear? So we have two things actually to talk about.
Sure. Yep. No problem.
Okay, and we can then consider that the next meeting and bring this up again.
Could I just ask,
Yeah.
since we couldn't afford cement, when we redid our apron, we were pressured into this a little bit. We were told that it had to be done now because they're here in the village doing the work, and we were going away, and so we just did it. The problem is that they didn't do cement, they did asphalt, so they aren't just doing it now. It could have been done later. We didn't really need to jump in and do it right now. I didn't get another estimate, my fault. But in the meantime, I want to be sure that just because we redid, there's a tiny bit of apron that's cement, just because we redid it in asphalt, if someone in the future, if the village comes through and replaces them at village expense, are we now totally screwed because ours has been, the original cement is gone and now part of it is asphalt? Or can we tap into the village replacement that they're doing for everybody, not us?
I cannot answer future situations. I think we would have to deal with that when it arises. Is that right, Ron?
So is the question, so you've got an apron that's partially concrete and partially asphalt, is that right?
That's correct.
And your question is, the next time the village does its
And does it
repair of the
properly.
street,
We've got a tiny bit of cement that was there that didn't have asphalt added to it.
Can it be redone?
50 years ago. Can it be all the way back to the right-of-way line? Because as of right now, it's asphalt in the right-of-way line up to about this much cement.
Yeah, so this council can't bind a future council, but that's certainly something that the council could talk about, especially if you say there's no insignificant additional time for the contractor to do it. And that could be put on the contractor's scope of work, this particular driveway, redo the whole section. We would have to address that when it comes up. How many years do you think it would be, Matt, before the village goes through that street again for repair?
25 years.
Really?
Well, no, the thing is that there are repairs being done, small repairs.
Let me just say one other thing. You're still working, you're far from finished, isn't that correct? Can you please be upfront with all the other homeowners now about what exactly is going on? Because we were never offered the opportunity to have the village replace that. We were just told it could not be done because we had put in a betterment. And I think you need to fully explain it to other people in the village so they don't get screwed.
This is what we're trying to clarify. We'll be clarifying with this.
If there is an ordinance, it would be introduced, published to the community, and a public hearing would be held.
But in the meantime, the work is going on.
It's over for the season, right?
Oh, it is?
Yeah,
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
until spring.
Okay, any other council discussion on this? Okay. Moving on, the financial report. We're in great shape. At the end of November 30th, we get our biggest tranche of funds from the state from the income tax. And this year was the second highest we ever received. And it came to $332,000. Last year we received $200,000, so it was considerably higher. And we should be getting, at a minimum, what we budgeted for from the income tax of about $600,000. We should be getting a little bit more than that. So we're in great financial shape. Also, we have put away $1.4 million of designated funds for capital expenditures, such as streets, sidewalks, lights, and we have to pay off for the wind decision, which was the Supreme Court that required, I won't go into it, required that we have to repay the state. And we have put money away for that. So we are now starting to dig into those capital expenditure funds. We will be doing more as the paving goes on and as we do our street lights. So our nice cushion of funds, hopefully, will be spent. That's what we put them away for, was to spend them to improve the structure of the village. That will be happening. Okay. We need a motion to accept the financial report.
Oh, motion.
Okay? Second? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Moving on.
Yes, you're done.
Managers report.
Yes, so I will be brief, just hit the
The highlight.
the highlights. The holiday fund is, I think tomorrow's the last day, so if residents wanted to donate some money to our friends at Waste Management, the guys who do the pickup truck, if you could send it into the office, that would be great, and thank you to all who have generously donated so far. Two contracts recently, we had an RFPs close for the village arborist position and to redesign and host the village website. So next Wednesday, we'll be sitting down with two finalists for the arborist position, and we are working on a set of questions for some finalists for the website. We've narrowed it down to three companies, two of whom have pretty extensive experience with municipal website design and hosting. The other's a local company that's a little bit smaller, but also put in a good proposal.
We should say that the current hosting organization has been very unresponsive to our needs.
Yes.
And so Matt at the Maryland Municipal League bumped into a lot of people out there who want our business.
Yeah.
And
So-
who are very experienced.
Yeah, and it looks like we have an opportunity to put together a nice new website that'll look good.
Good.
We had Rolling Acres come through and do street cleaning last week, so there might be some leaves on the streets now after the windy day, but the streets look pretty good. I'm going to talk to them, see if they can do a pre-treatment of the streets for possible precipitation upcoming this weekend. The one big thing is WSSC is coming back to Martin's Additions, this time for sewer main replacement. So we actually sat down with them on Tuesday to go over their sort of preliminary plans. They still have not bid out the job, I guess, but they're going to send over finalized plans, and then we're going to work up a permit for them before they bid it out.
What's the timing on that?
Late summer or fall of 2017.
And so we will not pave those streets, or we are paving those streets and having them dug up?
Yeah, that it kind of threw a wrench in plans because actually, in particular, Taylor Street was not on their website, was not updated, so there was no way to know that Taylor Street was part of this new project. So I need to talk to ABVers and talk to WSSC and kind of figure out what the best short and long-term strategy for that is. So they're going to be on Quincy, parts of Raymond, Chestnut, and then a little section of Taylor Street. We didn't do concrete repairs on those streets because we were anticipating this work. So we knew that it was coming. I thought it was going to be earlier than this, actually. So now that it's being pushed back, it might be a good idea for us to kind of go back and reevaluate it.
Okay.
We should wait until the end.
Yeah, we'll get a chance in a minute, as soon as we're done with this. After the report, we'll come back to you.
One thing is that WSSC is holding a public outreach meeting about this upcoming project, and it's happening Tuesday, January 17th at 6 p.m. at the Meadowbrook Park. So residents are welcome to go to that. I'll probably go to it myself so I can at least inform residents about what was said at the meeting. The other big project, street lighting. Pepco has put in an order with Hall of Fame, so they anticipated that them to start building that in the new year, and they said that they anticipate installations to begin in April.
How does this compare to the reports that you've given in the past? Has the date slipped yet?
Yes.
By how much?
Well, they were saying this. They were saying the spring,
They were
early part of the year. They didn't have a specific.
Yeah, they were
time.
saying early parts of the year, and so I actually talked to the guy from Hall of Fame to see what they can do to speed up creating the parts for us. He said that they might be able to bump it up maybe 2, 3, or 4 weeks for us. So we could potentially be looking at March. They weren't really giving, they said early in 2017 before, so they weren't being real specific about it. But I was thinking that it was going to be earlier than April.
As we're getting more specific dates, I think it would be helpful to highlight the differences between month to month in these reports. If has a date shifted, has it moved up? You know, it's probably getting
Fortunately,
forgetting.
in the last month, they haven't pushed it back at all. So there's at least that.
You know, let me mention this is the prototype here. We've had it for about 2 years now, and it's taken a long time to
think
get
it's 3 years
everybody,
now.
3 years, everybody on board. Pepco didn't have a rate for this. Hall of Fame produced these for us to specifications. All of this is now finally moving along.
Yeah, and I guess I've gotten a couple emails about, I think there was an article maybe in the Washington Post about LED lights, and actually Arthur kind of looked into the paper that the report was about, and we specifically picked out lights that don't fall into that brightness category that should affect people in that sort of way. So it shouldn't be a concern.
There was this report published as a report from the American Medical Association that said some LEDs could possibly harm your sleeping patterns and other things. And when I looked at the original report and then went back to look at some of the studies it was based on, you had to be kind of sleeping next to the runway lights at Dulles, about this far away, to get the kind of exposure that might affect your health. I thought it was a big scare story that was unwarranted. So ours is lower power, lower brightness, different color temperature.
Significantly lower power and brightness.
Right.
Yes.
From anything that was cited in this evidence. And even the evidence that was based on was it might affect your health. And it wasn't based on anything really substantial. Okay, proceed. So don't worry about it.
So then street and sidewalk repairs. We did concrete, excepting Oxford and Quincy. We've done up through Taylor Street. There are still some blankets over the concrete to kind of protect it from the cold weather. It takes a little bit longer for it to set, to make sure that it doesn't freeze. But because the weather is starting to turn, we're going to stop at Taylor Street and then pick back up again in the springtime on the other northern streets. And at that time, we'll also be starting with the actual street repaving as well. Fortunately, we should be able to do them concurrently. So it shouldn't push us back on when all the work will be completed. Everything else is more or less the same update as last month. The only thing is Joe Coutreau, our village traffic engineer, is also looking into the other streets on the north end about potential sidewalk installation up there. The next bulk trash pickup is January 14th, and that is, that's pretty much, those are
Good, thank
those are
you.
the big ticket items.
Can I ask a question about signages? We've been having discussion about signs. Could we move forward with sign renewal, cleaning, straightening, all the things that have to be
Can we also
done?
replace the old signs that
Yeah.
look like they're
Exactly.
100 years old? I know
Replacement.
they're not.
All the Village of Martin's Edition signs that are now about 25 years old,
But
probably.
I think that some of the signs actually would need redesigned, like the really
Right.
big ones.
Yeah.
Do you mean like the
The
entering
brown ones?
The wood
Yeah,
ones.
yeah. I think this should be a specific item on your agenda, is
Yes.
to
Okay.
move forward with signs.
Um,
And then we would throw in the rolling wood
Right.
as part of that consideration as we move forward.
Okay. Yeah, we talked about it last month, and when
Yeah.
I talked to Joe about it, he was saying that it would kind of happen as we were doing street repairs and stuff, but maybe it makes more sense to have him do it before the street repairs.
Well, we'll have to get an inventory of what has to be done, put in orders, do all, so it's going to take a bit of time to
Okay.
do all that.
Okay.
To know what we want to get,
All right, so
what it's going to cost. Then we'll probably have to have a budget item to cover that when we get an estimate of it all.
Okay.
I had two residents
Tiffany Cisna has now entered and is
Yes.
recorded.
and the Christmas
a big
concert was
present.
quite a success, so thank you, everybody. I had a couple of residents on Bradley approach me about the sides of Bradley next to where the repaving was done. There are a few places where there are potholes that are now getting to be inches deep and wide. I don't know if that's something that they can look at, but it's only going to get worse for the winter. And we've had a couple of people say, well, I had a flat tire.
Oh,
And I don't know if that's,
yeah.
so I
Is it
just,
just Bradley, or is it other streets too? So they probably should be looking at.
I can only speak to what
Well, I get that you mostly drive on Bradley,
Well, and
but
people mention it to me.
and people,
People have
two
brought it up.
residents have
we should
mentioned it to me.
probably look at the streets that
Yeah,
could fall in the same category.
good, thank you.
And then the other thing I wanted to ask, and you may have explained this earlier, but we're going to have a new header at each agenda, and it might make sense for you to explain why that's there, given the Open Meetings Act requirements I think you mentioned in an email to us.
Sure. Yeah, on the agenda, there's a statement that says, at some point during the open meeting, the council may entertain a motion to enter closed session. Amendments to the Open Meetings Act that took effect in October require us to have a written agenda with all the topics of discussion, which we already do as a matter of practice, and now it's a requirement of law, and to specify on the agenda whether we may enter closed session. Because sometimes we don't know until the day of the meeting that we're going to do that, and the agenda's already been published, I recommend just putting the notice on every agenda in case we do enter closed session.
The phrase that's there says, "The village council may entertain a motion." So it leaves us open if we need to or not.
And if we know for a fact when the agenda is written that we are going to enter closed session, we can change it to will, and we can provide more information,
Right.
according to such and such subsection for the purpose of, and provide more detail when we have it.
Good, thank you. I also want to recognize Paula Goldberg, our new tree officer, who's here tonight. Anything to say about our trees that you've come up in the last few days?
No, but I'm looking forward to meeting with Matt and Richard on Wednesday before we interview the two candidates
The
for
arborists.
the arborist
Good.
position.
Good, thank you. Thank you for taking on the job. Okay, any other comments from residents at this point? Larry, you had to
Yeah.
identify, the route.
I got to identify myself.
Yes.
Larola Wazola from Delfield Street. We've got houses that are in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. A couple of people that I know of have paid $14,000 to replace their sewer lines. And those aged houses are in the streets. Our streets are eminent to do that. Oftentimes, governing bodies are able to coordinate that with the utility so that for a substantially lower cost, because the utility will pay to the line,
Right.
okay, they can have it done at that time. And how can we do that for our
That's a good question. Matt, when you talk to the sewer people, could you check into that?
Yeah.
So
I think-
piggybacking, kind of like what
Piggybacking
you
on,
you
they're-
helped to do for the
Yeah.
it
concrete.
also saves a mess?
Right.
Yeah, I actually, I need to talk to him about something related, because I know that some residents received a letter from WSSC about the insurance about water and sewer lines. So I was trying to have a conversation with them to get a little bit more clarification about that as well.
It's a North American warranty company who offers that, and who contacted WSSC is U.S. Home Repair Services Corporation, which is actually a marketing company, and worked out this $395 for the monthly insurance coverage for sewer and $395 for monthly insurance for the thing. But it's available to anybody who wants to go online and find it. And that's essentially what it is.
Right.
And they absolutely disclaim any relationship to WSSC.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Any other observations? Lynn, identify yourself.
Lynn Welly, Oxford Street. Going back to the driveway apron subject, I was kind of shocked to hear discussion where aprons are responsibilities of residents or homeowners, when my understanding aprons are public property. Can I have an explanation?
Well,
The installation is the responsibility of the homeowner, but after that,
when the house is being constructed. We just had a full discussion of that earlier, and we've gone over various interpretations, and we are trying to clarify that in the
But I
future.
also listened to the lady here who was forced to pay for
Right.
something she felt very strongly
Yes.
was wrong. And,
Right.
so how did that happen?
We discussed that earlier. Historically, we have done various things, and we are trying to clarify that right now. We have, at the next meeting, we will have some proposals to clarify this. Before you arrived, we had a full discussion of this. So, listen, the minutes will be posted, you can listen to them, the discussion. Anyone else? Yeah.
Has there been any
Name and street.
Pat Pendergast, Thornapple Street? Any more movement on Thornapple 3407?
Yes, actually, thanks for reminding me. I forgot to add that as sort of an addendum to Doug's building administrator report. They emailed me today, and they were having back and forth with the county, so they said they would be submitting final plans to our office on Tuesday. So once we get those, we'll be sending
So are they going to move the house first and then subdivide the lot?
That was what they had talked about to us.
So they can move a house on property without subdividing?
Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah. Sorry,
Move
your
the first
question.
house over, then build a new house.
They're moving the physical house that right now is on 3407, and then, yes, they are subdividing the plot, so it's going to be on it'll be on what will then be 3405 Thornapple, and they're going to, this is,
is there a
this is
sequence
not,
that they legally have to go through that, can they move a house on a property? Can I move my house back 20 feet if I want to, for any reason at all? And then come by and do something else later on, like subdivide. They can't, they want two properties out of one, so they have to subdivide at some point.
right.
So they're going to move it from the side that's next to me over to the side next to the Edelsteins, and then slice it down the middle.
Right, yeah, so they are two different plots of land. Right.
He's inquiring about the sequence.
I think it's one.
Oh. So they're getting a demo permit for it to move the house, and yeah, so they're going to be moving the house from what is now 3407. It'll be 3405,
So
and then
it is already subdivided, is what we're saying.
it's not. So
It's one piece of land they bought.
right, that's right. But it's actually two different plots of.
Two lots?
It's two lots. I'm sorry, not plot. Two lots. So
So you're saying they're not subdividing, it's already
That's what I'm getting
subdivided?
at. I thought it was not yet subdivided.
Right.
Right, what?
He's correct.
It's
Bernard's lot was already.
Is it a fact it's been done?
It's two different lots.
If you look on the map,
But
you're saying.
they own the property to both lots. So they're moving the house from what is now 3407 onto 3405 and turning it into two different.
They'll build another house on the
And they said they weren't sure what they were going to do at 3407, but probably, yeah.
Are we
Right.
getting 3 buildings instead of 2?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Possibly 2 instead of 1.
Possibly 2 instead, yeah. Possibly 2 where there's now 1.
Possibly.
Well, you know, they'll get 2.
Those darn Republicans, I tell you.
Okay. Muttering doesn't count as discourse
One
here.
other quick, is that WSSC work, is that different than the other stuff to come on the streets in the north end and tear up the streets, the one you just mentioned? Is that new work? Because there's some other thing you mentioned before that touches Thornapple to tear up Thornapple.
Yeah, so that was one thing where I'm waiting to get the exact plans from them because online it shows from the north, the dead end Delfield Street all the way out to Summit. There's plans to work on that. But what they came in and showed us was not that entire stretch. So I don't know if there's two different. There may be two.
You mentioned Chestnut and others, but not Thornapple a minute ago. So maybe Thornapple's off the table for that.
Yeah, they didn't show that, so I'm not. But I asked them. The reason why I asked them to go back and send us the new plans after they've looked at it is for that reason. And
I'm just wondering because if they start tearing up Thornapple and these people start picking up and moving houses.
It's gonna be, yeah.
Maybe we want to look at the trees.
Taking it down.
Okay, any other comments?
What was their, did they say?
This is Larry Watson speaking.
Thank you. I've often wondered myself, what did they say why are they doing? Are they getting collapses?
The sewer?
Yeah.
They are replacing 6-inch pipelines with 8-inch pipelines.
Okay. Are they going to improve the, we get some actual open sewer gas venting on our streets. What are they doing about that?
It's a good question to ask when you talk to them next.
I didn't ask about that, so I'll get clear.
You need a building inspector to go with you. I'll go with you.
More appealing, I think.
Okay, any other issues, questions, responses, answers? No.
Yes, I have a question.
Okay, quick.
Okay. are the
Identify
lights
yourself
LED?
again.
I'm John Sherwood, Chestnut Street. Are the lights going in, are they LED, and what Kelvin are they? 3,000.
LEDs, 3,000? 3,000.
Super, I concur. 100%.
Okay. Anything else? The gavel is up. The gavel is waving. This meeting has come to a close. Thank you.
Congratulations. We didn't know that.
I thought we were doing sidewalk issues.
At 8, yes, that's what we came here for.
Oh, for sidewalk?
Yeah.
They're north end sidewalk problem.
Oh,
The agenda said it was going to come up.
Not just regular sidewalk. This is bigger sidewalk though.
What did I just say?
They read the manager's report where it said sidewalk is meaning the north end sidewalks and not just sidewalk repair.
And we were told it was going to be at 8:25.
It was
Manager's report, including street repaving,
streets,
sidewalks,
sidewalks.
streetlights, RFPs.
oh, okay, sorry. What did you have specific about sidewalks? What was your issue?
Okay, I love my street. I love my neighborhood. I don't want sidewalks.
Oh, okay, so you don't want, okay,
That's
this was a separate sidewalk issue, okay.
John Sherwood, Chestnut Street. You know, this is all new. I mean, are we still doing a village letter anymore? Or
Yes,
something
there's a
online?
regular
I haven't
letter.
seen the letter in
It's,
months.
if you want, okay, talk to Matt, you can get in the poster, it's online. It's emailed. You have a choice of getting it emailed, sent by mail, or both. and has been coming out, and it is typically email.
Is there, okay, but I mean, and this was an indication that we were going to talk about sidewalk. I mean, is this an arbitrary deal by the committee here that you're going to do sidewalk, or is it up to the residents to have some input, Matt?
Yeah. So a resident at a previous council meeting.
One resident?
It was a group actually of residents.
Yeah, there were a couple residents that had asked about and had raised the concern that when their kids are walking from Delafield Street down to the marketplace, that there wasn't a safe place for them to walk.
And there's a bus stop there too. The school bus.
And so the council thought that it would be a good idea to have an engineering team look at the possibility and to figure out what the potential cost would be to install a sidewalk. So what we did at first was we noticed that there were less trees down Delafield Street. So approached it as if we wanted to go ahead with it, that might be a place to start, and we got a kind of sticker price for that. And at the last council meeting, the council had asked that we look at Thornapple Street as well.
Sorry, I was just...
What was the price? What was the price?
It was going to be $40,000.
The potential price.
For partial street
For Delphi.
Right,
for Delphi.
and potentially taking some of the street away around bump outs around trees.
So, but it wasn't, it has not been finalized yet, and
I would say the decision to do it hasn't been finalized.
It hasn't been green lighted, or it was an exploratory thing.
It's up for
to see
discussion.
Where theoretically it could go, if and where it made sense to go. So that's the step that we're at right now.
I have a question on Marge Wasson.
Got name and street, what was it?
Delafield Street, Marge Wasson.
Okay.
It's the boss.
I'm with him. He works for me. You mentioned at a previous council meeting that a resident or some residents, which that wasn't clear, expressed concern about their children getting to the market, and then you mentioned a bus stop?
Or bus stop, in general, proceeding down the street, yeah.
Walking on Thornapple Street, in particular, is what they said, that there wasn't a safe space for their children to walk.
And it's a through street.
Yeah. So, do you have a point?
So that's some residents, but I'm not sure that most of the residents on at least the street I'm hearing you describe, Delafield Street and Thornapple Street, are even aware that this is under consideration?
If this would be something that we would be considering to make a decision on, we would make sure to notify the residents and hear their feedback. But at this point, it is just an exploratory...
So you anticipated my question. Thank you.
Yes.
So my question is, what is the procedure when, a resident brings forward a question like this? Does the question then generate, I don't know what the cost is that our village is spending on the studies that you've mentioned, or if anything has been spent, and I think I'd be interested in knowing what those amounts are and what you anticipate that would be going forward. So that's one question. And then the other is, what is the process once you have some report from someone you're consulting? What's the process then, as this would affect many residents on many streets?
Right.
So, and the genesis of it being, one or some residents raising a question. So it seems like a big steamroller has started going with someone asking.
This has come up, I should say, this has come up several times in the past, not just this one recent time. And it's more than one person.
40 years ago when I moved
Right,
in.
okay. So it keeps coming up. And there is no explicit procedure. But if we were to go ahead with it, just an exploratory, checking into it, costs, designs, it would all be made public, and before making any decision, there would be a very close consultation with all the residents.
We got for Delafield Street, we just got an estimate from the company that's doing our sidewalks, so they just gave us a free estimate and said it would cost you roughly X amount of dollars to put it in.
What was the X?
$40,000 to put it on Delafield.
To finish the run.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. So, this is just...
So you haven't actually, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
So you haven't actually engaged a company to do an engineering study?
No.
No. Okay, so would you consult the residents affected before engaging an engineering study? Is that the sequence?
Well,
That's what I'm trying to
I would think, we have, as I said, there is no sequence. We don't have a formal process for doing this. But we would probably discuss it as we're discussing it now. It will be in the minutes. It will be published in the Martin's Edition newsletter. Anyone who wants to listen to this is being recorded, will be posted. So it's not a secret. It's out there. I would think that the next step, if there were to be next steps, would be get more formal engineering designs of sides of the street.
Maybe resident comment. If I could
Residents'
just
comments, yeah.
Perhaps, and obviously, the lighting process that we went through. We did resident surveys. People went out
I think that a
and
survey
provided.
would be a good idea.
Yeah, survey. We had
Feedback.
prototypes
So-
installed on
So if you're
poles.
asking about what kind of, there's no written process, as Arthur said, but I think this council has very much tried to demonstrate we want resident feedback. We've done several surveys, again, just using the lighting project as an example, and I imagine that we would do something similar to get resident input before we went forward with making.
I would add that
or before engaging before expending money to...
yes.
I would suggest
the term decisions. Okay.
that one of the things I found in my 6 years now in the council is what people don't like is change. If there were sidewalks there and there was a proposal to take them out, we would have people up in arms about it. If there's no sidewalk and there's a proposal to put them in, we'll have people up in arms about it. And so I think we have to take into account the sense that people don't like change. Not necessarily they don't want the specific things, they don't just like change. So I would go ahead with in my own mind with that in my background. Yeah.
And this is Pat Pendergast from Thornapple Street again, and I know I've said it before. I'm opposed to sidewalks in North End. And given that the dead end of Delafield is the ones suggesting this, I'm very much in favor of sidewalks on both sides of the dead end of Delafield. And I'd like for that to be looked into. And
let me ask you specifically.
And also make it one way.
Why are you opposed? Give me some reasons why you're opposed to sidewalks on Thornapple.
Well, there's ample amount of space. These people on Delafield on the dead end go to a bus stop that's on Chestnut, so they could easily walk down a grass lawn on the right side or a completely open space on the left side. There's plenty of room for people to walk down the sidewalk.
There are. No.
There's also
walk on the grass on people's what people think of as their lawn.
No, it's not. We all know it.
It's a right of way. Okay,
that's what they do.
Okay.
So there's also tons of trees that you'll be taking out, big old trees. Talk about the right of way. There's people. Larry's like, you have a retaining wall. That's going to have to go. People put in fences. All that stuff's going to have to go. We've been living there. I've been living there for 16 years. You guys have been there for 40 years. It's a well-established area. It's very disruptive to come. You'll have to move telephone poles on all my streets. The fire plugs, the fire hydrants, they have to all move. Mm-hmm. We've never had a problem, and I was saying we had someone has to die on the sidewalk. But you can get around easily going through the yards. There's nothing obstructing. You don't have fences up on the street. That's not the problem. It's nice. The way we moved in is the way we kind of like it. A lot of us do. The way we don't like it.
We don't have obstructed rights of way that are off the curb. There's this weird stuff, grass, soft for kids, wide. There's no reason at all you can't walk down those streets
I walk down
safely.
all the time. And that's also why we're proponent of looking at making Thornapple one way. Because if there's any problem going on Thornapple, it's going around all the parked cars. more narrow street than a lot of the other streets around, and we handle some traffic coming through, but people go around the cars. If you had the one way, it would be a lot easier for pedestrians to get around.
Okay, well, as we move forward on this, if we move forward on it, these are exactly some of the considerations we want to hear.
And also, if you take $40,000 and multiply it times all the streets there, it's $500,000 at least.
Any discussion on council on this? Yeah. Lynn Welly.
Lynn Welly, Oxford Street. This is all brought up by residents expressing safety concern. So there's areas in the village, Quincy Street, Oxford Street, that have sidewalks. And I would like the village to put out that those sidewalks be left available at all times for pedestrians. And when they're not available for pedestrians is when contractors, visitors, whatever, people come and they park their vehicle and it blocks the sidewalk. And then people that are supposed to have access to the sidewalk are forced to walk down the apron, sometimes all the way onto the street, and then circle around and maybe get back onto the sidewalk. The pedestrians are the caretakers for children or parents with children going to and from school. Some elderly people that have dogs that move very slow because they're not agile, they're like young people, and it can present a hazard to them maneuvering around the car. And so I would like the council to agree to have something in the newsletter to the effect that the sidewalks are for pedestrians, and please refrain from and tell people coming to your place to not have a vehicle on the sidewalk, blocking the sidewalk. This is a safety issue. I see it in certain places repeatedly over and over and over again, and I think if you're concerned about safety, responding to residents on Delfield Street or Thornapple, they have safe walking, then it should also be the same concern where sidewalks are already established and they are sometimes blocked and residents don't have free and easy access to use them.
Okay, thanks. I think we've had this in the newsletter a couple of times. It may pay to keep repeating it. And we've actually asked the police on occasion when they're patrolling to look just for those kinds of incidents when it creates unsafe conditions.
And if the police finds it, then what's the response going to be?
They have not been giving tickets, but they have been giving warnings to tell people that it's inappropriate.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, if you go to North End Delfield and walk around, we don't have that problem. People aren't parking with their tails obstructing the right-of-way to walk in. And you have all the space to walk that you want.
Okay. Thank you.
And it's a beautiful country area. Okay?
Good.
I love it.
Okay, any other?
Yeah, I would like to just add one point. Again, it's Marge Wasson, or it is again Marge Wasson. And that is, you mentioned a bus stop. There's a bus stop on Delfield, I think.
I'm not sure.
School bus?
I'm not sure where. But in the 36, 7 years we've lived here, there's been bus stops on every corner I can see from my house. Years go by, the kids live in different places, the bus stop pattern is different. It's not always in the same place.
Right.
So if the location of a bus stop is a factor, it's where it is this year is not where it's going to be next year. And that's not, and I'm not sure that's a basis for a major capital improvements or whatever you call them to our village streets.
Good, thank you. And with that, this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you all.
Okay.